All righty, committee, I think we're going to call this meeting to order. I love that Senator Salazar. There's some chairs back here with materials so you can look at them.
And Representative Williams.
Perfect. Okay. Well, the purpose of today's Joint Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resource Committee is to go over interim topics. And LSO has compiled a nice list of what was submitted online through the portal. And it's about 15 pages. Nothing fancy, you're not missing out on anything, but this morning I kind of tried to put it more in an outline format so we can kind of see what state parks, what falls under state parks umbrella, what falls under game and fish, tourism, and some other things. So that's what that is up there. So with that, I think maybe a way of tackling this is I don't think we need a vote on whether, on each item, whether or not we're going to take it up. But I think what Chairman Flitner and I are looking for is, how much committee members want to work on these issues. So maybe we might do some straw polls here and there about some of those issues and just get a sense. We'll have to balance out how much work we can take on. And so that's something we, have the discretion to do. So really right today, what we're trying to understand is the issue, how much time it'll take, and if there are going to be leaders on this legislative side to push these bills. I've sat on committees where people bring bills and then it hits the floor and then none of the legislators are that invested. And I don't think that's a good way for us to do our work. So with that, I think maybe it might be good to just jump in with state parks. And here we've got a few items. I organized I saw 9 of them in the big packet. One dealing with transportation and recreation programs, trails, things like that. I believe that was brought by Representative Banks and Representative Newsom. Cultural Trust Fund update, Expenditure Authority, Sunrise State Archaeological Site, State Parks Law Enforcement Retirement Plan, State Parks Motorized Trails Building, Motorized Trails Rules, Development of Hot Springs State Park by Representative Haraldson, and then State Parks Decision-Making Master Plan Process is kind of how I broke that all out. So with that, maybe we can start with a discussion on active transportation and recreation programs, either Representative Banks or Newsom, if you want to walk us through. I combined yours a little bit together, but I hope that's okay. And if they're separate, let me know.
Sure. Thank you, Chairman Ellis. So this bill, I believe, came to us as a budget amendment, if my recollection serves me correctly, this session. And there's a lot of support around the state for it. And I was going to pull the survey and didn't get a chance to do that, but 80% of the survey respondents were supportive of the concept of the development of more trails, both, I think, for hiking, biking, multi-use trails. So, and it also goes into the SWAT program out of Southwest Wyoming. And so just looking at ways we can further enhance and develop trails in our state, not just in state parks, but that would obviously be a primary source of those trails. Like I know the SWAT program in Southwest Wyoming is working across multiple land ownership to develop that program as well. And so the program this year included a grant program. I don't know that if we want to get into that far or just kind of looking at what trails need to be established, what trails could be enhanced and so forth. So Wyoming Pathways is the one that did the survey. I don't know if I have if the results are on here or not, but so that's sort of where the idea came from, is through the Wyoming Pathways Alliance.
Thank you, Representative Banks. Representative Newsom, did you want to add anything?
Just a little bit. There's a program, Safe Pathways to Schools, and I think that's an important piece of this as well. Many of our towns, including mine, have had residential development across from that students have to cross busy highways to get to schools. And so we're looking at, can we develop a trail system for the students to get to the school safely? And that's kind of the impetus on my part for this, as well as just trail development throughout the state.
Alrighty, committee members, any other comments on this topic? And state parks, would you, Madam Co-Chair?
Thank you, Chairman Ellis. And Representative Banks and Newsom, on these topics, had you given any thought to funding sources? Scratch tickets. Okay. There's an idea. Beyond a bake sale.
I didn't. Thank you, Chairwoman Flitner. I did not. I know we had allotted in the initial budget this year $9 million. The bill that's commented here was 40 million. But I did not give that any further thought.
I believe there might be some funding through the Department of Transportation, through YDOT, matching funds with the federal government possibly, especially as we talk about safe pathways to school. I think there's some funding opportunities there. We would certainly have to put some general fund money in probably, but hopefully that could be matched pretty generously through the federal government.
Okay. Thank you. And just so I have a sense, is there anyone in the audience that wants to talk on the outline of kind of the state parks things that we've identified? And then is there anyone online that has signed up and raising their hands? If you're online, please raise your virtual hand. We've got one person. Okay. So we have some folks from state parks right now with us. How about this? We'll maybe address this transportation and recreation issue, and then see who wants to testify online. And then maybe, because I brought these on your behalf, the rest of the items, cultural trust fund through the state parks, motorized trails rules. After that, we'll just jump in and ask you to give an overview of all of those items. Do you have any comments on the active transportation recreation programs?
Madam Chairwoman, Dave Glenn, Deputy Director, Wyoming State Parks, Historic Sites and Trails. This fits kind of right in our wheelhouse, working with the 7 collaboratives we have, working at community-driven collaboratives throughout the communities. That's exactly what they're working on. So, as far as the trails and design and where they should be, those folks are already working on those types of things, all the way to the SWAT work that is happening as well. I would also throw in that there's some RTP funds that potentially could be available for those, especially on the non-motorized end. And then lastly, just an update, we're going to be holding a bunch of listening sessions throughout the state in the coming year, asking folks, would they be willing to pay for those types of things as well, especially on the non-motorized mountain bike trails, hiking trails. As you know, I've mentioned this before, it seems like a lot of the access and a lot of the infrastructure is on the backs of the motorized community, the hunters and anglers. And it may be time to sit down and have discussions with folks, and we're talking with communities to say, are you willing to pay a fee if the money goes back to the process? So far, when we've had those discussions, it's been resoundingly yes, but we're not done running our trap lines yet. We really want to make sure we're talking to everybody in the local communities.
Any other comments on this particular agenda item? Committee members, what's your feeling? Is this something you want to look at? We have 2 representatives that brought the idea forward. Does anyone absolutely have a negative reaction to looking at this issue? Senator Schuler?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think this is a no-brainer for us, with the big influx that we had with tourists, especially during the pandemic. They were everywhere in our state, places that sometimes we never saw tourists before. So I think we need to get on top of it and make sure that we have proper, things in place for our trails to not only take care of our issues with, the folks that maybe have land around those trails, or cities or towns that maybe haven't developed some of these things. And so I think this is just kind of a no-brainer for us to go down that road. Thank you.
Thank you. And then I did want to ask the person online, did they want to speak on this issue? If we could turn on your mic and turn on your camera. Hi, hello, Michael. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and appreciate your time this morning. I'll be brief. Senator Schuler, I appreciate your comments. Representative Banks, I appreciate yours as well, and certainly Representative Newsom, and also Director Glenn. We're hitting on the same topics here. Wyoming Pathways conducted a survey statewide asking citizens what we could do to make their towns more safe, healthier, more active in terms of getting around if they want to walk or ride their bicycles. In addition to that, we also asked about recreation needs. Senator Schuler mentioned we have a massive influx and we have folks camping and hiking and walking all over the place. And sometimes they're getting on private property, sometimes they're maybe degrading trails. And so I think we do have an opportunity here to do things the right way. Certainly our primary goal with this effort is to increase safety for our children. Second would be to improve physical and mental well-being of our citizens. As an example, the Platte River Trails Group in Casper observed a 300% increase in the use of their in-town trail system for folks who were more or less just getting out to clear their heads during the pandemic. And we're so grateful for those opportunities. Lastly, we see a giant opportunity for economic development. We do know we have lots of data and research from around the country and also in Wyoming that indicate when you have walkable, bikeable trails in your community and access to soft surface trails near your community, you see an influx in business development, you see an improvement in quality of life, you see an attractant to young families who want to move to communities. And so I would urge your support for this. Wyoming Pathways is well equipped with a 10-year track record of making improvements in communities around the state in these very areas. And we stand ready to help with anything we can do for communities around the state of Wyoming. And I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you so much. Questions? Thank you so much, Michael. Have a good morning. Alrighty, committee, let's move on to the, Representative Harrelson.
Just a concept or an idea. Obviously, I think we're almost talking about two different things here. So I'm hearing biking paths in state parks, and I'm hearing walking paths for kids to go to school. And I'm not disagreeing with either of them. The truth is, you put people on the mountain, they're going to make a trail. And so we need to get on those trails to make sure we don't make an erosion. So I think it's a good idea. Obviously, the more people you put on a mountain, the more you're going to get a trail. The more you get a trail, the more you're going to have an issue as God does his part and puts rain and water and all those things. But so we need obviously a funding structure for that. But I think we just need to understand, I feel these are two different topics. One is a biking path in our communities. The second is going to be a walking path through a state park or a biking path. Or so maybe a little bit of it. I see a little bit of a disconnect.
Thank you. I think the point's well taken. When we submit these to Management Council, I think we probably will do something more broad that says trails and pathways and, explain and let the process unfold and see how it goes throughout the session. Mr. Glenn.
Madam Chairman, thank you. I would hope that we would look at this not just within state parks and not just within communities. So we're looking on federal lands, we're looking at state lands, we're looking at county lands as well. Because I think we want to disperse, educate, and concentrate our folks and our visitors when they come, depending on where we're at. And I think we're going to need to be looking at those federal lands as well. Thank you.
Madam Co-Chair?
Yes, Chairman Ellis. Director Glenn, are you guys already having those conversations with the feds?
Absolutely, Madam Chairwoman, Chairwoman Flipner, yes.
Okay.
We're talking with the feds on not only would they do something like the motorized trails program where they enroll trails, then they could apply for funding to maintain and build more trails, but also new trails that we would build under an MOU with state parks and the Outdoor Recreation Office.
Alrighty, committee members, just in the interest of time, I know we probably need to prepare and we've all stayed up late. I know the House was in late, the Senate was as well, 11:30 last night. It's 8:43, so we've got a big list. Let's keep plowing through it. Folks from state parks, if we could get just an overview very quickly on an update on the Cultural Trust Fund, the request for the Expenditure Authority, Sunrise State Archaeological Site, and the rest of those items. And then maybe we'll just do questions. I think these are all, obviously I'm very comfortable with exploring them more, but want to make sure the committee better understands the request.
Madam Chairman, this is Sarah Needles. I'm the Deputy Director over Cultural Resources, and I brought to your attention the Wyoming Cultural Trust Fund as maybe less of an interim topic that you would take action on, but more of an opportunity to make you more acquainted with the trust fund and the kinds of things that happen around the state. This was, I'm bringing this on behalf of the Cultural Trust Fund Board. They want to make sure that this committee in particular understands what kinds of things we're funding, how that's helping with economic development in communities. And all three of the communities that you're going to have interim meetings in that are listed do have projects, several projects that we could introduce to you, bring constituents in and briefly, have them talk about their projects, the impact it's had, and maybe have some opportunities to even after the meeting tour some of these sites.
Questions for Ms. Needles? I think that would be helpful. Certainly we had some discussion on appropriations amounts for the Cultural Trust Fund this cycle, and we are the committee that has oversight, and so I think we should have a better understanding of some of those projects. The next one is the Sunrise State Archaeological Site. And for people in the public, after we get through this kind of series of issues, I'll open it up for public comment if you want to comment, but we just have a lot of topics we're going to try and get through today.
Madam Chairwoman, Nick Nealon, Deputy Director, State Parks, Historic Sites, and trails. The Sunrise Archaeological Site, as you know, because we've come to you a couple times to talk about our progress with it. This is an important archaeological site not near Guernsey State Park. We've gone through our internal site criteria process that involved some of our commissioners, a number of our staff. I believe Representative Harrelson was on that committee as well. And the committee recommended to the agency that we do pursue inclusion of that site in our system for protective purposes primarily. The topic was then taken to the State Parks Commission, State Park Cultural Resource Commission, who also agreed that it was a worthy topic and recommended to Director Westby that we bring it forward to you.
Questions on Sunrise? Representative Harrelson, I know you were involved. Do you want to comment?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So I think, like we said, protection. It's one of those things where if you were to walk onto it, and the majority of people walk on and look at this site, they go, "What is it?" Well, actually, you're standing in the middle of a medicine wheel, and so you need to move out of that. And that's the kind of the concept is you go out there and it is a prairie, and obviously you can start seeing things that would lead you to believe that there was prior activity on that site. But what we really don't want is a ton of people to be released upon it to destroy it, or even try help it and in turn destroy it. So more than opening this site up, it's more protecting this site for future purposes and the archaeological side of it. Obviously, there's a lot going on there with the red ochre mines, and it's a beautiful, cool site, but it's not really a site that you would put the bathroom in the parking lot, and for two reasons. One, it's very remote. Second, there's a huge glory hole next to it, and third, the fact that it would probably be very easily damaged. But I think it's definitely an idea to kind of put it into a lock and key concept to make it where historically it can be researched and they can move forward very delicately but intelligently to see that site. So,
Madam Chairwoman, one of our commissioners, Dr. Gardner, was on the committee, and he remarked that this was an important enough site that it might be worthy of inclusion as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's that important a site.
Other questions from committee members? I've been out there. It's amazing. Very unique place. The next one is State Parks Law Enforcement Retirement Plans.
Madam Chairwoman, our peace officers, our 5 law enforcement officers, our 5 permanent law enforcement officers, are post-certified and perform law enforcement duties like other law enforcement personnel across the state, sheriffs, local police, highway patrol. They are some of the few law enforcement folks who are not part of a hazardous duty retirement plan. Our agency, I say we, I was before our time, our agency tried to have this happen in 2014, and it did not make it, I don't think it made it out of committee, or made it, I can't remember exactly, but we'd like to try it again. Our folks put themselves on the line and put themselves in danger on a regular basis. Just last summer, we had 2 of our park rangers, seasonal rangers, in fact, 2 of our seasonal rangers assaulted. One was choked from behind. One was wrestled to the ground by an intoxicated individual. They put themselves in harm's way every day, just like another law enforcement officer. So we think it's something that they deserve, and I think it would help us recruit better law enforcement folks if we can get that done as well.
Madam Co-Chair?
Thank you, Chairman. Director Nayland, how many individuals are we talking?
We have 5 full-time permanent law enforcement.
Okay.
Director Nayland, can you put a little more detail on what happened in 2014? Which committee brought it, and how far did it get? Was it a committee-sponsored bill?
Madam Chairwoman, it came out of the Judiciary Committee. And again, it was, I'm not entirely sure. I've heard rumors about why it failed. I'm not entirely sure why. Again, it was before our time.
Thank you for that. I'm familiar with some of these post-related issues, and so that's where I wonder if we're the right committee for that, but certainly something we can discuss. Any questions about that particular issue, committee? Okay, seeing none, let's talk about the State Parks Motorized Trails Building and then the motorized trails rules. I'm guessing that's Mr. Glenn.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. As many of you know, it's moving through the CapCon bill right now, the purchase of the Collins building, which is a trails building over in Lander. That's been very valuable and very important to our trails program. Working through that process, how it came out was that A&I would manage, operate, own, collect rent, to make that happen. In having discussions with A&I, we think it might be more efficient. State Parks has the ability to own buildings. Would it be more efficient to have State Parks manage that building, operate the building, collect rent on the building? I have Andrew here from A&I if you'd like to hear from him as well. But just to clean that bill up a little, it is a CapCon bill anyway, so within 2 years it's going to expire. So we're going to need to do something statute-wise to just clean that up.
And then, Mr. Glenn, have you had any conversations about whether or not TRW is the right committee for that conversation, or if it should be another committee that handles kind of more ministerial construction, acquisition, A&I type issues?
We have not had those discussions, and that is a good question to ask Chairman Ellis.
Okay, any other questions about the building? Assuming it goes through on CapCon, okay. And then State Parks Motorized Trails rules.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. There's a little gray area out there regarding what is an enrolled route and what is an enrolled trail. And an enrolled trail is one of those off-road trails where folks can go out and ride with their little registration sticker and have fun and do things. The enrolled routes tend to be county roads, city roads, and other things. And there's a little confusion on that piece. And what we want to do is put in statute that if you're going to ride on an enrolled route, a county road, a city road, whatever the cities or counties decide, we want to make sure you have the proper insurance on that and you have the proper equipment. It's different from the license plate. This would be using those stickers. And there's a couple ways we can do that. We've been talking with YDOT. They've been very supportive of this. And it may be through the Transportation Committee that this would be best, but we want to make sure that we can either change statute 31.5/1601, which says, hey, this is what's required if you use those routes. And either way, we're going to need to go in there and kind of clean up the difference between a route and a trail. The other piece is looking at 31.2/701 to 707, and that's where it gives the Trails Program the ability to promulgate rules. But those rules were promulgated before the Wyoming Administrative Procedures Act, so we would have to go in there and kind of clean that up as well. So those are the two ways we could do that. But we think it's very important because a lot more communities are starting to enroll those trails. We want it to be black and white for our law enforcement and peace officers to make sure it's very clear on what's required and what's not.
Questions from committee members? And I want to be sensitive to turf. Certainly sounds like a transportation, very important issue. If only we had the Senate Transportation Chairman on our committee. Oh, wait. We do. So I think if we move forward with that, the sooner the better, so we could maybe take it to transportation and make sure they have the opportunity to vet it. I think anytime you bring in Title 31, it makes sense to make sure they're fully looped in. Chairman, do you have any thoughts on that? Did you want to comment, Bill?
I think, Madam Chairman, sorry, I don't have a microphone, but I'll just try to speak up. No, I think there's an opportunity for some cooperation between a couple of committees. We kind of did that a little bit on the Southwest Trails issue that came about over the last interim. Transportation did quite a bit of work on that. It didn't make it through the House, but I think it's absolutely spot on that we've got to be aware of it, and I would be happy to coordinate with you two, Chairman, and do what we can on transportation.
Thank you. The last thing we have, is there any other comments on this particular issue, committee members? And then the last one is state parks decision-making processes, a master plan process. This was brought by Senator Case, who I know corporations, I think, is meeting to discuss interim topics right now, so I'm guessing he can't be here. But just wanted to get your thoughts on if we wanted to take a deep dive into what happened, I think specifically out of concerns with Sinks Canyon, and just wanted to open that up for your comments and thoughts.
Madam Chairwoman, we have a process in place to handle things like master plans and engagement with the community. Clearly, there were some disconnects with a Sinks Canyon master planning process. Some things, in hindsight, we probably could have done better. And I think we've been looking at those things internally, and we'll make improvements to our process.
Alrighty, committee members, do you have any comments about that? Alrighty, let me see, I'm gonna make sure, oh, and I forgot, I skipped right over this. Development of Hot Springs State Park, and I didn't put this on the list correctly, this was brought by Representative Winter. So Representative Winter, did you want to explain your thoughts on this?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Representative Sweeney and I have been working on this, and Representative Sweeney might want to make a few comments. He's got to go to another committee meeting directly, so I'll let him start it off.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So the concern is, it seems like there was a lot of work done previously by state parks and others, notably Senator Driscoll and Senator Agar. I think that's been 2-3 years ago. And we don't, my understanding is no movement. And what happened to the plan, all the plans, all the direction that had taken place. So John and I visited with Senator Driscoll a little bit on direction forward and where can we pick up the process. The community has great, the town of Thermopolis has great interest. It's a huge tourism draw, and I think our feeling is that we're missing the mark on trying to move something forward. And so that's why we wanted to try to dive back into this and see what could be done on behalf of the state. And definitely the center part of the state, Hot Springs.
Representative Winter?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. Just so you folks know, and I'm sure you probably understand that the town of Thermopolis is really concerned about this. There doesn't seem to be any movement on it. I know I've visited with you folks off and on, and I know you're dealing with the RFIs and a few things. You sent me a picture of a map that you're considering, and that's good. But this thing's been going on now for, I don't know, close to 20 years, I understand. And we'd just like to have a little background on what has taken place, I guess, and how we can bring it up to date and move forward. So I know you can do it, and I want to help you where I can. So thank you.
Comments from state parks?
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Winter. So we have had some considerable successes over the last year. We went 10 and 13 years without having two of our concessionaires in the park under contract at all. Within the last year, we have created management agreements for both of those partners, the Days Inn and the Star Plunge, and they're both under 5-year management agreements. So we have something formal with both of those folks now. Additionally, last fall, we put out an RFI, request for information, for nationwide, to try to see what kind of interest there would be to help develop the Hot Springs State Park. We received 2 really good, solid packets of information from national vendors. We also received a couple proposals from local folks who wanted to do smaller scale things working with the park. We put in a large request for ARPA funds for Hot Springs State Park that didn't make it forward. And so we were waiting to issue an RFP until after the session ended, just to make sure that we didn't receive any of those additional funds. So to wrap that up, we see going forward with an RFP sometime over the summer.
Okay. Well, Representative Flitner and I talked about meeting in Thermopolis, so I think that would be appropriate for us to look at the facility and get an update and see what more we can be doing. So that's a good topic. Anything else from our presenters here?
Madam Chairwoman, we bypassed our most important request, which is State Parks Expenditure Authority.
Yes, I skipped right over that one.
If I could speak on that. Statute 36-4-121 subsection H allows state parks to expend some of our self-generated revenues on maintenance and operations. Right now, it's maintenance and operations up to 60% of the fund. In the past, the fund the limit was set at 25% and 30%, both times in response to budget reductions. When the COVID budget reduction happened, we were faced with either reducing services greatly at some sites, including closing campgrounds, things like that, or in some cases, closing some of our lower visited sites. So we came up with the request to come and ask for the ability to spend up to 60% of that fund and then up to is the key. We've never approached the actual number we were given. And adding the word operations, it originally just said maintenance. We asked to add the word operations. And adding the word operations was critical because it allowed us to hire seasonal law enforcement people, hire seasonal fee collectors, which increased revenue, hire seasonal interpreters, which gave us better engagement with our public. It allowed us to purchase things like toilet paper, lawnmower blades, things like that. It was really critical to the success of our operations. The bill passed during the general session in 2021, but it came with a sunset date of June 30th. And what we really need is to have that sunset date removed. Again, we have done a really good job managing those caps. We've never when it was 30%, we did not come up to that 30%. And now that it's 60%, we've kept it below 45%.
Questions? And my apologies, I did skip right over that. Questions for Deputy Director? Representative Haroldson?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. June of this year?
Madam Chairwoman, Representative Haroldson, June of 2023. Unfortunately, it sunsets right in the middle of the biennium, which made budget development this year very interesting.
Perfect. Thank you.
We weren't thinking on that one, were we?
All righty. Thank you so much for your testimony. If there's anyone online that wants to talk about any of those state parks related issues, please raise your virtual hand and we'll let you in. Who in the audience would like to speak on any of these topics related to state parks? Aaron Taylor?
Are you taking me next? Okay, thank you. Madam Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Erin Taylor. I represent the Wyoming Arts Associates, advocates of the state of Wyoming, and I'm really happy to be an advocate for arts and culture in the state of Wyoming. I would just like to back up the information that you heard from my colleague to my left, Sarah Needles, about the Cultural Trust Fund. Really being your purview in your committee, I think it would be worth the time for you to learn about the trust fund, how the grants are given out across the state. The recipients from arts and culture folks across the state are the beneficiaries of this, and of course your communities across the state. And so that's something that's really important and something that we talk about a lot is building the state that we want to live in. Not just work, right? And so I think it would be worth your while to learn about the funds, how they're utilized, how more dollars have been infused into the fund, and what opportunities are out there, and how it impacts economic development across the state. So, Madam Chairman, we'd be happy to support in any way with how you pursue this over the year, and really encourage the committee to continue to learn more about it.
Thank you. Questions for Ms. Taylor? Seeing none, thank you, Aaron. Is there anyone online that would like to testify? There's no one. Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to testify on this? Thank you. Let's move on, Madam Co-Chair, to game and fish. Looking at the 15-page document that we had, I broke it down into kind of maybe getting an update from the Wildlife Task Force, and that might encompass things like preference points for the big five. And then Representative Haraldson suggested hard to draw deer, elk, pronghorn hunt areas. Representative Landon, I know had to leave, but he suggested maybe a look again at disposal of wild animal carcasses within townships or cities, chronic wasting disease. I believe there's somebody in the audience who might want to speak to that. Senator Salazar brought Wyoming trap reform. Senator Landon also wants an update on fish hatcheries. We will be meeting in Casper, which might be an appropriate place for us to learn more about what's happening there. My co-chair brought elk population management and control, and then Senator Case brought special revenue funds. So with that, Madam Co-Chair, how about I turn this over to you and let you talk a little bit about Wildlife Task Force and what you think might be on the horizon.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Ellis. And Director Nesvik, you can speak to this better than I, but I know that within the task force, we've had this conversation already. Task force hopes to bring this topic and a bill prospect to this committee during the interim so that it will be ready for the general. So if maybe just get everybody up to speed on what you anticipate that might be like and the time it might take.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Chair. So the task force is wrestling with a lot of issues that were identified at the onset of actually its very initial 2 meetings. One of the topics that has actually already been voted on by the group and recommended for the interim session is this notion of, and there's a pretty good model that's been built by the task force in transitioning preference points, which is the current system for the harder to draw species. So I'm talking about bighorn sheep and moose, and transferring those to a bonus point system. There's a lot to that. It's complex. In the interest of time, I think that's what we hope to be able to address with the committee during the interim is the details of that. But that is a recommendation that has support from the Wildlife Task Force, not unanimous as I recall, but an overwhelming majority recommendation to bring this to this committee in the interim. Additionally, we do know that we're going to be discussing exactly what Representative Haraldson's listed here in hard to draw areas for residents that many of you who've been in the legislature for a number of years remember that resident preference point bills have come up multiple times. And really that topic that's been identified there by Representative Haraldson is something the task force will be wrestling with and will likely have some kind of a recommendation on. Additionally, there is the potential for the group to address damage compensation. That's currently, a lot of it's directed in statute. A lot of it's, actually executed through regulation, but there are statutes that I foresee would potentially need some attention if the task force was to go certain ways. And then additionally, and this has come before as well, as this whole issue of commercial guides on waterways and regulating those uses is one of the items that the task force has identified as study. And so I can see something coming from that too that may come to the TRW committee in the interim. Obviously, there's other potentials, but those are the ones that I see as most likely, Madam Chair.
Okay. Questions for Director Nesvik, committee? What about time? I'm just wondering, of these issues, would these be updates you think from the task force, or I'm just wondering if we should plan to put one of these or all of these on on our agenda so that we'll be ready to work a bill if the time comes.
Madam Chair, excellent question. I think that, and you've been there through the discussions on the bonus point issue. I see that as a bill draft. I see some of these others as bill drafts as well. And so I think they're going to require a significant amount of game and fish's portion of our time at each meeting. And so I would anticipate that probably needing, half a day for these topics at each meeting might be necessary.
Okay. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So just jumping into this concept, and I know we've talked, thank you for your insight onto this. And obviously, I believe a preference points for deer, elk, and antelope or pronghorn for residents in the state of Wyoming would be a train wreck. and we've talked about that.
Mhm.
But I do believe a draw and then having an opportunity where if you draw a coveted area, then you'd have a period of time where you would not be eligible for draw until you become eligible again. If we do that process, I believe that we can clean it up. Your guys' job would be way less. I will be, if at all possible, I will be at your task force meetings for this discussion, so I can weigh in. I would love to be able to kind of be a very active part in that decision-making process all the way through to the legislative side where we bring a bill as a committee if we can. So I'm committed to that. I know a lot of hunters are behind me and committed to that, and would love to see this cleaned up so we can make this a more workable system. So
Director, we had the chronic wasting disease disposal topic that we discussed that an interim ago, I think. But what are your thoughts on that?
So, Madam Chair, I think that there are definitely some challenges right now with several landfills, and it's more along the lines of not regulation or statute, but I think funding authority and funding abilities for these smaller landfills to be able to do what they need to do to comply with federal and state laws related to carcass disposal for chronic waste and disease. So, I mean, I think it's probably a topic worthy of discussing in the interim. I don't know that the amount of time is anywhere nearly as significant as this other topic with the Wildlife Task Force. But I do believe it's something that we can certainly explore some ideas that might be helpful.
Okay, questions, committee? All right, let's, did you have a question, Representative Knapp? Did you raise your hand? I'm sorry. Let's talk about, we also had trap reform. Senator Salazar had brought that. And Senator, would you like to come up and speak to that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, excuse me, this is an issue that was brought by a constituent of mine. And I do know that Game and Fish has dealt with this, is working on this, and is making, I think, some real progress. I just bring this up because, again, this is an issue that, you know, we're dealing with hidden traps and snares designed obviously to trap, but in the process, people's pets are caught because there's not has not been proper notification of where these traps end on a public trail. However, I think we're making progress in that regard. So, but I bring this up because this is something from my constituency and in rural areas, but, and I thought it would be worth the committee's time, but I do know it's been dealt with to some extent in the past. And so just wanted to get some discussion going on it, but
Okay,
I'd be,
Director? you
Yeah,
wanna-
Madam Chair, Senator Salazar is exactly right. This has been addressed, and actually by this committee, the last TRW committee, and one of the recommendations that we had, that the commission had, was that the legislature grant the commission authority to regulate setbacks around trails or around trailheads, parking areas, campgrounds, boat ramps, those kind of things. And that notion was soundly rejected by the past committee, by the past TRW committee. And that's kind of where we stopped. We have continued to do, as Senator Salazar points out, a lot of the education work. We've done some things in our regulations that we can within the existing authorities. But those setbacks are something that we can't do without additional statutory authority.
Okay. Committee questions for Director Nesbitt? Chairman?
No, Madam Co-Chair, I just ask anyone who served on TRW at the time, remembers that conversation, if you want to fill some of us in on how that issue evolved and what kind of your feelings on it.
Vice Chairman?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I was on the committee at that point when we were talking about trapping, and there was not an appetite within the committee to do as strict a regulations as was asked for by the anti-trapping community. And we did, with the director, give some guidance on how we might decrease the interface of the traps and pets, people's dogs, and we're getting caught up in those traps. And that's a problem. It still is. But you have to be respectful of the trapper's rights as well as the pet owner's rights. So, and some people are trapping to make a living. And so that's one of those balancing points that the committee was not willing at that point to do any, I don't know if I want to call it drastic, but any what they saw as overreaching regulation on trapping. And there were meetings with the trappers and with the communities, and those led to some really good dialogue between those two groups. But still, the committee was unwilling to make drastic changes.
Director, do you want to add anything to that? I mean, we certainly would be willing to take this up if you feel like the commission really would like to push for some authority so that you guys would have a little more flexibility at the local level. Let us know what your thoughts are.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think Representative Newsom did a great job of summarizing kind of where the committee landed, and there was significant public comment from the anti-trapping community that was asking for significantly more than what was being proposed. And I remember some of the conversations amongst the committee. I think that influenced their decision to vote no on doing anything. But you know, if there's an appetite, we've done the work, we've got the recommendation, we can certainly bring it in the interim and ask the committee to look at it again. I think it comes down to a matter of priority for you and time. You know, if you got to look at time, we know some of these other topics are going to take quite a bit of time. I think that should be a consideration anyway.
Yeah, having been on the committee.
Madam Chair?
Yeah, go ahead, Senator.
And I just want to echo, I have no desire to infringe on trapping rights. So I think when I brought this forward, it's to protect those trails and as a good representative said, this is a balancing act. And so I certainly don't bring this to restrict someone's rights, but to protect pets and owners, to make sure that they know what areas are could be lethal to their pets.
Right. Yeah.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
And I would say leaving that to the department is important as this interface continues to grow. And I don't look at it so much as a trap reform, but just this is happening off trail. You know, when pets are allowed to run free, and that's when the interaction happens. So it will be an issue, and it'll continue to be an issue. But I think it's one that the department can handle.
Well, and Madam Chairman, just knowing the temperament of the legislature, having been on this committee since I've served, most legislators have been unwilling to grant any more authority to the Game and Fish than they already have. So that is also something to be considered. So good to know. All right, moving on quickly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Real quick, can you legally put signage up?
Director.
Madam Chair, depending on the land status, the answer is yes, most of the time.
Okay, second question. And I'm sorry, I'm going back on something real quick, but mobile incinerators for chronic wasting disease, has that been a consideration?
Madam Chair,
Director.
Representative Haroldson, absolutely very cost prohibitive.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Very, very cost prohibitive. Okay. Fish hatcheries, Director.
So this is really, we're not asking for the legislature to make any decisions here, but this is something that Senator Landon brought the last interim. There is a real nexus here to aquatic invasive species because we are making some changes at our fish hatcheries now to deal with that. We do import most of our cool and warm water fish species, for example, walleye, crappie. We import most of those because we don't hatch them and rear them in our state. So there is an opportunity here to provide some information to this committee on the hatchery system. It's something that we're very, very proud of. They do really cool work, and the product and the consequence of their work is a heck of a lot of angler days across our state. So this would be just an opportunity for a kind of an educational thing. And when we were in the Casper meeting, the idea is to take you out to the Spies Hatchery. That's one of our state-of-the-art fish hatcheries, and let you get a tour of that.
Okay, committee questions?
Madam Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
Madam Chair, I think that this, just getting some information and learning about these fish hatcheries is important. It was something we were approved to do last time, and it was delayed because we had our special session, which meant we had to cut our meeting short, and then we had the virtual meeting to make up in its place. You all recall. So I do support us learning more.
I do too. Elk Management, and you and I have had conversations about this, so the committee's probably not as much aware of what's going on statewide, so if you could just update us on that and the importance.
Yeah, Madam Chair, so the department is currently working on elk management around the state, where we've got real challenges with over-objective elk populations. A lot of those challenges and our abilities to manage those directly relates to our ability to have access on private lands. There's other issues as well that affect our ability to manage elk populations. Like I said, we've recently received quite a bit of concern from some eastern Wyoming landowners asking the department to do something different. And we're currently working on that right now. I think that, the idea here would be, and I know that Mr. Magagna is here today to speak to this as well, but the idea here would be if there are things that are identified by the department that we need to do a better job with this, if this was on the interim list, it would provide a venue for us to bring something to the legislature to ask for a change in statute or some new tool that we might be able to use for elk management.
Okay, committee questions? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. That's my area, and I would really appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. And I think that's it. Any further questions for Director Nesvik? Do you have any? Okay. Thank you, Director.
Thank you. If it's okay, I'll stay here until we're done with public comment. I need to keep Jim Magagna at arm's length while he talks, so.
Well, since that was just our last topic, Mr. Magagna, would you like to come forward, please?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and I will keep my distance from the director. This was an issue that we've called attention to, and the director mentioned the seriousness of it here in southeastern Wyoming. But as this has gotten more media attention, particularly in the ag media, we've been getting input from ranchers across the state in several areas where this is a significant problem. So it's not limited to one area of the state. And it's particularly come to head now because of drought. The Game and Fish has a number of tools, of course, hunting seasons, and that is an important one. Damage payments, and damage payments have worked relatively well when it's compensating for a physical damage to a fence or to a water facility or something like that. They don't work very well when it's just damage to grass out on grazing lands, which is what we're faced with here. They do have some authority for deprivation hunts. Our thought here is that getting the committee to have a broader understanding of the seriousness of the issue, it has actually resulted in some of our people having to significantly reduce the size of their livestock herds, particularly during this period of drought when they can adjust for drought, but unfortunately there's no ability to adjust wildlife populations on a short-term basis to affect drought. And our concern is that perhaps the Game and Fish doesn't have all of the tools that they need to effectively deal with this. So the ability to explore that, working with them, and then have the committee consider any ways in which they might provide some added tools or authority for the department to be able to address this issue. It's not only impacting our ranchers, but in some areas it's impacting deer populations because the elk are taking over some of that habitat. So for those reasons, we think it's deserving of some committee time, and there may well be some legislation come out of it, and nothing specific that we're proposing at this point in time because we think a good discussion needs to take place first.
Okay, thank you. Questions for Mr. Magagna? Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. All right. Anybody would like to testify on any of the Game and Fish topics that we've explored? Yes, come ahead. Jess?
Madam Chairs, members of the committee, Jess Johnson, Wyoming Wildlife Federation. I wanted to touch first on the look at the Wildlife Task Force, and having watched this current bill that came out of the task force come through, I do think that as many eyes and as many ears that can be in on what this task force is working on is going to only benefit us in the long run when we have to look at bringing the bills back and through the body with keeping the intent as the task force put forward. So I just strongly, strongly support that as an interim topic. We have been at every one of those meetings, and even I get lost in how complicated some of these issues are. Secondly, and just to touch very quickly on the chronic wasting disease, I know you touched briefly on carcass disposal, but that is one of 3 options I think that we can look at. And I think coming out of the chronic wasting disease working group, there were 2 recommendations for a policy or a statute consideration. And one of them was looking at the authority and the enforcement over the, let me get the correct words, intentional private feeding of wildlife. So not looking at agriculture or anything like that, but looking at the people that are feeding moose or feeding bears by feeding moose or feeding deer within towns. And right now, there are county and city ordinances, but oftentimes they are sort of bumped down to that lower rung for sort of what is needed to be enforced in the time. And I think, you know, chatting a little bit with different, whether it was Byron with WASCOP or others, I do think that this could take some looking at and how we approach this. And if we can hand authority, maybe it is to Game and Fish, maybe it's just a discussion on how we look at this and can enforce this, because it is a vector for chronic wasting disease. It is pushing animals into places that they come back to habitually. And there's a lot of information around it, whether it's collaring data, looking at how moose move in Jackson or other stuff out there. So it just really sort of urge that as a consideration alongside of the carcass disposal. And the third one is smaller and I think maybe less important in this state, but is something that we can look at. And that is the authority to sort of regulate the sale of cervid urine as far as bait practices and hunting and stuff like that. So I do think both of those came out of the chronic wasting disease working group in 2020 as recommendations. They have been thoroughly looked at. I would recommend that you chat with the co-chairs that can bring those recommendations forward. But looking at how chronic wasting disease is, it's here, it's not going away fast, and looking at how we manage the spread of that and the vectors of that, I think is an incredibly important thing for us to stay ahead of the ball and not behind the ball on.
Cervid urine, boy, that would be a fun topic through the interim.
I can see a real great bill title.
Looking forward to it.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Jess.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Anyone else?
Online?
Do we have anybody online? No. All right. Take it away. Film incentive.
All righty. So under the umbrella of tourism, Director Schober, welcome. Let's talk about film incentive.
Good morning, Madam Chairman, members of the committee, Diane Schober, Executive Director, Wyoming Office of Tourism. Here with me is Charles Lammers, who has been overseeing all film inquiries and requests. And we brought forward, at the request of the working group in the industry, a revisit of what was attempted this year with House Bill 93, film production incentive. And we believe that the bill would be an easy topic and an easy lift for all of you, only because it was ready for the floor. There were some amendments that we were proposing had it gone forward that would have cleaned up some of the distribution questions that were discussed at your last meeting before the session started. And so we would just ask for your favorable consideration to include that as an interim topic and bring this bill forward for a general session. I just would remind you that from 2007 to 2018, when the incentive was working and there was production, a very robust production program in Wyoming, over 28 projects, those projects spent $18 million buying goods and services in Wyoming, $9 million in salaries, wages, contracted employees that were Wyoming residents. There were just a little less than 200 crew hires for those 28 projects. And so this is an opportunity to obviously, and diversify our economy and invest in something that has a tourism advantage as well as an economic development advantage. We're here for any questions.
Questions, Senator Schuler?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Yeah, just a quick question. I wasn't able to follow the process over in the House because our folks over there, didn't make it our way. I just wondered what some of the concerns were that maybe were brought out during the topic over there. And maybe there's some things that we can take a look at to try to make the bill a little more palatable to everyone.
Director Schober.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and Senator Schuler. I actually would defer to some of your colleagues in the House for that, and then I can add perspective, but I think they understood it more. They were working on the floor, knowing what was being discussed.
Vice Chairman, the biggest concern in the House of Representatives since I have served in the legislature is the constitutionality of the fund and using public funds for private purposes. And that seems to be what causes the greatest concern. And, so that's your biggest hurdle, is to try to get over that. And I don't disagree that it's a good program, and we've had this conversation, but just know that going into the interim, if we take this up again, that when you come back, that's what you'll be faced with. And our good friend, Representative Jennings, is not here, and he could elaborate.
And Madam Chairman, if I may, the funding source from the 2007 to 2018 was actually through general fund dollars, and the proposed funding source for House Bill 93 that this committee advanced forward would have been from statewide lodging tax collections that went into effect in 2021. And so I don't know if that has a different appetite or a different, could bring a different lens of the funding source for this, because it would be non-general fund dollars that would be put toward the incentive program.
Madam Co-Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. In my mind, I see this as no different than buying a billboard or buying a TV ad, as far as expending money for the benefit of tourism. So I don't see a constitutional issue because the office buys advertising all day, every day. And I don't see this program as being any different. Those films showcase Wyoming. We're paying people to put those films together, which we pay our ad agency to create video all the time. So paying these film production companies to create video, I don't see it as any different than hiring an outside firm to create video for us. Thank you.
All righty. Any other questions for Director Schober? Representative Winter?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I wonder if we could get a recommendation or a ruling from the AG on this issue for the Constitution, because it's going to keep coming up unless we get a ruling on it. So I would hope that we could request that and move forward.
Okay, that sounds reasonable. Director Schober?
And Madam Chairman, I do have one other request of you when you're finished with this, the topic of the film. So I just wanted to be sure that maybe I could add a little bit more to what we'd like to discuss with you during the interim.
Sounds good. And on the constitutional question, LSO has done a good job of putting together a memo, but I don't believe there's an AG opinion on this. So we can explore what that might require to make that request. But I do think a lot of work has gone into the film incentive bill. And so, I do think just knowing the constituents out there that have the interest, I do think it needs further look and, a little bit more process. If it dies in one of the chambers, it dies. But maybe in a general session, it's a better time for us to take a look at it. Any other comments about film incentive, Representative Banks?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Just a quick question for the director. Do you have the numbers? You mentioned 2007 to 2018 when the program was running. I assume you have. Did that drop off when the program was eliminated in 2018?
Director?
Madam Chairman and Representative Banks, we don't have any tracking mechanism officially for projects that happen on their own. Even within a film production incentive, there's still film work that happens in Wyoming, and we don't always track everything. I mean, because people may not come to us to seek it. But there's, Charles is here. Maybe, I don't know, Charles, if you have any further information on that or if we just don't know.
Representative Banks, I believe that the numbers did drop off significantly, mainly because when you get film incentive questions, that's mainly what they ask first. And then if you don't have a film incentive, they don't really have a need to continue speaking to you. Again, as Director Schober mentioned, the productions that don't come to us, we can't account for those. And a lot of times there are productions that I hear about after the fact that don't come to the film office, so I can't speak to those.
Alrighty, I think, is there anyone online that wants to talk about the film incentive? If you do, raise your virtual hand. And I see you've got one person in the audience. Is there anyone in the audience that wants to talk on it? And then you have one more request. How about we listen? What's your other issue, Diane?
Madam Chairman and members of the committee, I just would like to be able to have a couple of hours set aside at one of your committee meetings at your convenience to just update you on the work of the Office of Tourism. We have an exciting program of work coming up for this next biennium. And we did not have a chance to do this over the last 2 years, to spend some time with you going through the work around our advertising efforts, the work around our destination development and community enhancement programs, and just really would love that chance to share those with you. It has been something that we had historically always done. And I think as the economy of tourism is so profound for Wyoming, and really, I think it could deepen your understanding of the interagency relationships as it relates to game and fish and state parks and cultural resources. So I would just ask that maybe we would have roughly 2 hours at some point during this interim to share the good work that we're doing and we're so proud of, and get your feedback on it as well.
Thank you, Director. Mr. Brown.
Good morning, Chairwoman Ellis, Chairwoman Flintner, and members of the committee. Chris Brown, representing the Wyoming Lodging and Restaurant Association, the Wyoming Travel Industry Coalition. You heard me speak in favor of the film incentive moving forward throughout the interim, and so I won't repeat those points, but I would note that I think the only point really holding that bill back was the 40 vote threshold in the House. It did appear on that introductory vote that there was pretty significant support for this bill, and we do still think it's a valuable program to move forward with discussion, and hope you will. Thank you.
Questions for Mr. Brown? Seeing none, thank you. All righty, with that, we'll end our discussion on tourism. The next item that is on our list is YOGO. Representative Flintner and I had some conversations and are learning more about the state plane coordinate system. And there's a unique history. You can imagine, in the 1800s, when you had land surveyors moving west and surveying land, the instruments and technology they used to complete that. Times have changed. There's more sophisticated tools out there. And so this, I don't know if we've got the person who submitted this online request, but the statutes that are in place right now are using some old versions of tools that were used to work on the state plane coordinate system. And so this might be an opportunity for us to modernize that, learn a little bit more about how we survey lands now. And I don't know if anyone's online to testify. If you are, please raise your virtual hand. And this is coming to us from people we don't normally see. So I don't know that they quite knew about today's meeting, and I didn't get a chance to follow up with them to make sure they were here. But that's that topic. Does anyone have any interest? I think that this could be very interesting for us, and I think so. Yeah, Representative Haraldson's got some thoughts. Yeah, so.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just was asking if this was drone-based surveying. And I just was wondering if that's how it was, because I know that's something that they're moving in the direction of, is drone-based surveying.
Good question. I don't know.
Okay.
So.
I would assume it is. And
Okay.
it's an interesting conversation. It'd be worth at least a conversation to see if it's something we need to work on in the future.
Does anyone have any major heartburn on taking a look at this issue? I think it would be an interesting one. Vice Chair Newsom.
Would that, thank you, Madam Chairman, would that be more in the purview of transportation than this committee?
That's a good question. What do you think, Madam Co-Chair?
Well, just to update the committee chairman, the conversation had to do with the fact that, we've got so much recreation and outdoor enthusiasts anymore that are reaching out into our wide open spaces, and there's conflict with private land ownership versus public lands. And just having the correct mapping coordinates in place so that people know where they are. And so I think that's why it's important for this committee to maybe at least get an update on this. I don't know if it's, it's a big issue, I'm sure. It would be nice to get an update on it and see where we are statewide, and maybe at least, a couple hours.
And I think, my co-chair and I have talked about the fact that maybe this bleeds over into the Ag Committee and Transportation and some others, but maybe we'll just start scratching it and seeing where we get, and it might be bigger than what we want to take on, or maybe we can take it on, I don't know. So anyway, that's that issue. The last thing on our list is gaming. Representative Newsom brought about an idea for structure, and I'll defer to her.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So as we look at the increase in gaming, the increase in the work we've asked to do the Gaming Commission to do, and the broad topics that they have to discuss. So as I looked at it and I see live horse racing as a separate entity from historic horse racing, from skill games, from online sports wagering, and I think that we might look at maybe taking the Gaming Commission and just looking at the overall structure, and maybe having a separate board that deals with the horse racing, with live horse racing, and then a separate board with all within the commission that deals with actual gambling, and just looking at how that might look. And then the other thing is this committee the proper place for that activity of gaming, or is revenue a better place to put gaming than here? So maybe we keep horse racing, or send horse racing to ag, which is it's in the ag statutes, and send gaming to revenue. So that's just a thought. Then we could have that discussion with the folks in gaming.
Madam Vice Chair, I'll add to that. I have been thinking about this issue a lot, and I do think that, Representative Newsom and I have talked, if you look to our state to the south, they have everything within their Department of Revenue, and then certain divisions for gaming, horse racing. And so I've actually asked and submitted a request for our Revenue Committee to take a look at this. And maybe that means folding it into the Department of Revenue, but having a carve out for a parimutuel commission, kind of going back to what we had. But so I would propose, and curious to know committee members' thoughts, and then we'll take public comment, what it would look like if we maybe kept this as a backup. We'll take a look at it if Revenue decides that they don't want to take this on. But the more I think about this, I do think that having a citizen-led 9-member commission, when you have all the demands that they have, I just don't know that that's the right structure. Thoughts from committee, and then we'll take some public comment.
Madam Chairman, I agree, and I've had the same thoughts as we've sort of had difficulty through the interim with the gaming issue, and just the concerns for our horse breeding program and our racing program. And I think I agree with my vice chairman completely that we probably ought to look at just the structure that she's thinking about. And so I'm all for taking a look at this in the interim myself.
Any other comments from committee members, and who in the audience would like to speak public comment? Is there anyone online? If you're online, please raise your virtual hand so we can let you in. Okay, seeing none. Then the other topic that we had for gaming is video gaming terminals, brought by Representative Flitner. I'll let her explain this, but I just want to be very clear. The individual who submitted this works for the same law firm that I just joined not long ago. So if this topic were to make it to our table, I would completely recuse myself from working on it entirely. So we would need strong leadership from members here to carry this. I would not be engaged at all working on this. So Representative Flitner, if you wanted to address this issue.
Well, Madam Chairman, I'm all about gambling and gaming. So that's why I brought this. Actually, I was approached and asked if I would sponsor this, and I said, sure, but I also said that I believe that these issues should go to revenue, and that's my thoughts, and that's my opinion. And so that's it. And I don't believe I see the person here who asked for this to be, is he online? Okay, would you please welcome him in?
This is Neil Tomlinson. Do you turn on your video and your microphone, sir?
Hello, Mr. Tomlinson.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the time this morning. This is really a pretty straightforward request. There was a gaming study that was done back in 2020. Part of that study included a look at video game terminals, which is a different form of gaming that is very similar to HHR and also skill games. All we're requesting in this interim topic is to have a more in-depth discussion about this as about the economic impact of regulating and taxing this additional form of gaming. Certainly, we have no issue with going to revenue if that's the desire of the committee and of revenue committee. Certainly, we'd welcome that. But after being part of the Gaming Commission study that looked at all different types of viable forms of gaming, VGTs, video game terminals, were also discussed at the Governor's Business Forum. There was a panel on Wyoming's gaming economy, and it was a topic there as well. So we're just looking to take the next step to have an ongoing dialogue about the viability of this type of gaming in Wyoming. And so we don't believe it would take much of the committee's time, perhaps, an agenda item on one meeting to kind of get into how it operates, how do you regulate it, how do you tax it, what are the pros and cons of it. So that's really all we're looking for. And we appreciate you willing to sponsor this, Chair Flitner. Thank you very much.
Okay, questions for Mr. Tomlinson, Representative Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So my question first is, who do you represent?
My name is Neil Tomlinson. I represent Golden Entertainment.
And follow up, Madam Chairman. So my difficulty with this, quite honestly, is broadening the scope of gaming. I'm concerned. I don't want to look like, personally, I don't want to look like Montana with a small casino on every corner. But especially in Billings is my reference point. But what would be your take on my comments? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Tomlinson.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, in response, I would just say certainly those are valid concerns. And I think the whole idea of having this as a discussion item would be to address any and all of those concerns. Certainly what may or may not have happened in Montana is not necessarily what's right for Wyoming. So I think that's really the idea here, is to just have an honest discussion, a more in-depth discussion to find out, how and if this would fit into Wyoming's gaming economy. So certainly, that's part of what we'd like to discuss is what does it look like for Wyoming? What would it mean? How would it operate? How would it be regulated properly? How would it be taxed accordingly?
Thank you, Mr. Tomlinson. Appreciate it. All right, committee, that brings the end to our list discussion. Yes, Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I just really echo what the other Vice Chairman mentioned. I've often wondered why some of our gaming issues are not in revenue. I'm on the Revenue Committee. It just seems like the perfect place for it to be. And particularly since we've expanded, into sports betting and some of these other things, I just think that it just makes total sense for us to take a look at changing the structure. I don't think it really belongs here. And I think the Revenue Committee can give it maybe a better look. And thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
I do want to get a sense, is there any member of this committee that really has a burning desire to bring the video gaming terminal conversation to a head? Because I just want to be clear. I'm seeing some shaking heads. No. Okay. Well, thank you, committee members. Co-Chair Flitner and I will take this information. I think we've got a lot of good feedback. State parks and game and fish, I think if you look at your list, we have lots and lots of issues. So I think we'll do our best to try and sort through how much maybe we can work with other committees and maybe kick out a letter or however this lands to all of you. And we've got a lot of things to work on. Representative Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So I just came from revenue, and just got told our interim topic is Thursday at 1 o'clock. So any participation, looking at the good chairs, if you're available, would be very helpful, I think. So,
Representative, absent something extraordinary happening in my life, I will be there.
okay.
Extraordinary, what qualifies as extraordinary?
With that, our meeting, I think, is adjourned. Extraordinary, like I got ran over by a car.